Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 264. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson-Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, listeners, viewers, Patreon subscribers, and family members of the Moonshot Show. Welcome to episode 264. Mike, I say it every week. Maybe our listeners and fans are kind of thinking, hey, Mark's always going on about this episode being one for the record books. And to be honest, I'm going to say it again today because we do have an action-packed episode within this new series on creativity, don't we?
We certainly do. We are going to a book that, if we had a category, Mark, that was, why didn't they teach us this at school? This is certainly in that category. So if you're looking to live your dreams, particularly dreams that are creative, that take you out of the mold, and you want to create something in the world, be it a book, a play, a movie, a song, whatever creative art you want to bring to the world, if you have made a little bit of inspiration and you now need to do some perspiration, boy, oh boy, this is the book for being resilient in the face of all the creative challenges in life. Mark, I think we're going to war here.
You're totally right, Mike. I couldn't say it better myself. We are diving into Steven Perspiration Pressfield with his synonymous work, The War of Art. So this seminal work from this author has really, I think, captured a lot of people's attention, particularly because, as we're going to find out today, Mike, it brings some much needed, let's say, tough love to a lot of those of us who are out there trying to create, trying to do our best work. It brings that little bit of tough love and helps us all remember that sometimes you need to dig in deep in order to go out and do your best work. But this idea of resistance is certainly something that Steven calls out within this book. And I know for a fact within our clips today, he's going to bring that to life for us even more.
Yeah, so let's get stuck in. Where do we begin this? What are the grumblings of war that we're going to have with our creative efforts? Where are we going to start to conquer the creative block?
Well, I just referenced this R word, something that you and I, we've run into on the Moonshot Show several times before, and that is this magic word, I'd call it, of resistance. So this theme will come up a lot within the War of Art. So why don't we hear from the author himself, Mr. Steven Pressfield, kick today's show off in style by helping us relate to how all of us, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, all have to go out and struggle to win the war.
There is this negative force out there that I call resistance with a capital R, a voice in our head that tells us, you're no good, you can't do this, who are you to think of whatever project that you have in your mind, and also to distract you. Let's go to the beach, let's have another drink, let's have an affair, blah, 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 blah. If you decide you want to be in the creative arts, it's a war. And you're going to have to fight this dragon every morning that you wake up. To do that, you have to find some kind of a mindset, whatever it is. A warrior mindset, the mindset of a mother that's going to protect, the life growing within her, whatever it is, to overcome that thing called resistance. That it is a war, and you have to fight it every day.
What I love about this mindset, Mark, is we don't grow up thinking about being creative, drawing, writing, being in the theater. We don't think about this together with the concept of war.
Yes.
In fact, I think our biases are often that it's some like fuddy-duddy, light-hearted, be creative, or someone smoking a cigarette in a cafe in Paris. Oh, I'll be creative sometime. We associate this looseness, almost this laziness is attributed to creativity and doing creative work. What I love, what Steven just did for us is he literally is the creative version of David Goggins. right?
I like that.
He's literally like, dude, you got to work on it. You got to work on it every day. And much like great athletes and great business people, what Pressfield highlighted in that clip is like, oh, self-doubt. Oh yeah, everyone feels that. Distraction and avoidance, everyone does that. Just like when you listen to top athletes, do they get stressed? Do they fear that they're not good enough? Yes. Same thing with entrepreneurs. But the difference for those that truly succeed and do great things, it's not that they don't experience it. They work out how to live with it and get through it. And this is the warrior mindset. Pressfield is presenting this. You need to go to war with yourself to build your art. And if you're not prepared to do that, you will fall victim to self-doubt. You will fall victim to distraction. And what I find so powerful is no one ever presented this kind of thinking about the creative works I did as a student at high school, for example. Nobody talked about this discipline, resilience, and this war. This is like so fresh, this way of thinking, because we've seen it, Mark. It applies to creativity, happiness, doing your own startup, whatever it is. You have to be prepared to go through hell and high water and overcome all of the very natural things of self-doubt, distraction, and avoidance, lack of self-worth. You got to be ready to go through that. It's just part of the course. As soon as you hear this, you go, it's such an aha moment, because it's like, oh, okay. So tough times will come if I'm doing something meaningful, if I'm trying to be creative. But it's okay if I have self-doubt, because that's part of the process, isn't it?
I mean, it's the guarantee, isn't it? There's going to be moments, whether you're in, as you say, an athlete's situation, or whether you're in the boardroom, whether you're an entrepreneur creating a business, or, as we're finding out today with Steven, a creative, which, romantically, you can imagine somebody sitting in a hammock kind of coming up with a fun book. That stuff doesn't flow as easily as it seems like it does in the movies and so on. And you're totally right. This procrastination, this resistance, this block that I think hits a lot of people. We've run into this idea with Austin Kleon, with writer's block. We've run into, even, as I'm sure we'll reference maybe once or twice more in today's episode, Elizabeth Gilbert, with the idea of big magic and coming up with an idea from scratch. A lot of these situations are going to be guaranteed, and a lot of the creatives out there are going to struggle. And if you can come to terms with that early on in your journey, and you can see that on the horizon, it's going to come. But that's okay, because you're ready. You're aware of it. I think that is where Steven's really taking us within the War of Art, because you're naming that beast early, and you know that when it does come, you've already built some resistance and can deal with it. What an opener, eh?
Oh, I think the power is if you can go into that and change how you respond. Like, I think this is where the empowerment comes. So let me hit you with a list of things. Let's say, Mark, that you're going to write a book. I'm going to hit you with some things that you're probably going to face. And what you'll get the chance to is you can respond to them with this war of art mindset. So I'm going to list these, and then you're going to tell me how you're going to respond. You might feel imposter syndrome, like, what am I doing writing a book? You might fear the critique that the book receives. You might fear being compared to other authors. You might fear that, it's not really perfect. I should have used this in chapter 1. You might fear that you'll just get to your desk and you can't write a thing. You might put your manuscript to a publisher and get rejected, and you fear that. You might constantly hear self-doubt and all these things coming about. You might be like, the way I'm trying to tell this story, it kind of sucks. Or you might I'm going to put in all this work and not get a dime back. These are all the things you could face. So, Mark, normally, what do we do when we have these thoughts? Before we get to Steven Pressfield's thinking, what are we all guilty of when we have these thoughts? What do we do?
Well, I mean, it's classic fight or flight moments, isn't it? You know, in that list, comparisons, not as good as you want, the
Yeah.
lack of enthusiasm, both internally but also from others.
Yeah.
Those are the moments where, if it was me and I'm behind my typewriter, I'm going to be thinking, should I bother? Maybe I'll throw in the towel. Do I want to fight for it, or do I want to run away from it? That
Right.
challenge, Mike, that is where that resilience and that grit that we find out in so many other walks and disciplines that we've studied on this show really, really comes in, isn't it? It seems as though the creative art is just as much akin to all these other spaces,
Right.
as it needs that resilience that we know from Yoko, we know from Goggins. You got to lean into it, don't you?
You really do, because here's the thing. The best way I can describe the average and the behavior for most is when they have those kind of self-doubts and fears, they run away.
Mm.
They run away.
Mm.
I've been so guilty of facing self-doubt and fears like that. And I'm like, I'm out of here. Okay.
Man,
But
me
imagine.
too. Haven't we all?
Oh, God, yeah. But here's the thing. If we take writing as an example, Stephen King has these sorts of thoughts, right?
Mm. Mm.
J.K. Rowling had these sorts of thoughts. The difference is they didn't run, they faced these thoughts. And here's the thing. That list that I just gave you, if you were doing something that wasn't challenging, do you think you would have that degree of concern?
No, you wouldn't, would you? And I think, Mike, where this idea of resistance comes in handy for authors and anybody who's struggling, as we were talking about prior to the show, this is your moment of evolution, of change. When you go up against those publishers like J.K. Rowling did, and they say, a book about a teenage wizard? Nah, we're not interested. What did J.K. Rowling do? Went to the next one. You keep on pushing because you feel as though you've got that story to tell. And I think that's when you evolve. You become more resilient, and also you become that better at communicating those struggles to others. And you become, I think, richer for it, don't you?
So here, I think, is the formula to overcome this moment and embrace this mindset. So if you can do the following, right? Let's say you were publishing your bookmark and you started feeling these things, that you will now be able to say, because I'm feeling some self-doubt, this is a bit of a stretch. There's some ambition. There is therefore some growth in writing this book. Because if it was really easy, or, for example, exactly the same as the one you just wrote, you'd be like, hey, I already done this. I can do this in my sleep. Do you really think you're going to fear that? No. So what you can start to say is fear, doubt, good. Because you know.
Who was saying that to us, Mike?
That was good old Yoko Willing. Problems, good. So what we can start to do is intercept the flight or fight response that you mentioned and say, I'm not going to fall victim to that. I'm going to say, this must be stretching me a bit because I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable. Oh, that's great because, I read Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I know that getting a little bit uncomfortable, that's the path to growth, and growth comes to a point of satisfaction and fulfillment. So we know we're on the right way. And then you can say, well, listen, I know that all the greats had the same feeling and that they learned to cope with it. I know that if I truly see this as an opportunity for personal growth rather than fear of failure, you can be on the way to that transformation because you're no longer hampered by the block, by the fear. You move through it. Like Ryan Holiday, obstacle is the way. Face the obstacle, know that the obstacle is there for your own growth, and go forward, Mark. I mean, this is like what our members are doing every single month, right?
Look, whether we're looking at the statistics and research from Angela Duckworth's book on grit, or Mike, whether we're leaning into all of our amazing members on the Moonshots show I know for a fact that the thing that connects all of these individuals is this idea of resilience, powering through those tough times. And I know, as you do as well, our members are definitely up there with the most resilient that we know. So please welcome in and celebrate Bob, Niles, iTripton, Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa, and Sid, Mr. Bonjour, Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samola, and Barbara, Deborah, Lasse, Stephen, Craig, Ravi, Evert, Raul, and Nicoada, Ingram, Dirk, Venkata, Marco, Jess, Roger, Steph, Ron, Nibelin, Diana, Christoph, and Denise, Laura, Smitty, Corey, and Daniela, Mike and Antonio. High five to all of you guys. 12 months and counting. But hot on those heels is Zachariah, Austin, Fred, Ola, and Andy, Diana, Margie, Ron, and Jasper, Fabian, and Guhong. Thank you guys so much for being part of the Moonshots family and being members of Moonshots.
Absolutely. A big thank you for your continued support. We really do appreciate it. And because of that, we can go on a journey, Mark, and that takes us right to our next clip.
You're totally right, Mike. I think a reference that we've had on the show before is, again, there's going to be tough times. And pretty much guaranteed is this need to deal with sometimes feeling a little bit lost, a little bit stuck, and a little bit unsure of which way to go next. So let's hear from Steven, who's handily going to reference this period of exile, or as we know, the valley of darkness within the hero's journey.
It's a quest when you're in exile to find home. That's what it is. I think the main thing I would say from this book, from what we're talking about here, is that the real agony of that period of exile is the sense that you feel that it's meaningless, that everything is random. You're just bouncing from job to job, mate to mate, disaster to disaster, addiction to addiction. And you think that it's meaningless. But the lesson or the thought I want to have from Government Cheese is it's not meaningless. You are on a hero's journey. It's a journey toward home. And no matter how blindly you're stumbling into walls and falling into pits, it all has meaning. And it all is working towards something. If you'll just keep your eyes and ears open and try to learn the lessons that are being jammed into your face, that it is just like Odysseus went on his Odyssey. That is the great, myth of Western civilization. And the reason it is because we all have it inside us. That journey is all inside us. The software is there. And if we just follow it and kind of keep hanging in there, we will get to home just like he did. So if I can communicate that what seems meaningless has meaning, even though we can't understand it yet. At some point we will reach a point where we can look back and go, when you look backwards, it all makes sense.
Yeah, if it's finding home, Steve, how do we narrow in on what home is or how to navigate there? Is there a certain feeling?
I mean, I think we just know it when we're there. It's like we were talking about the doors that have to close until one opens, or the alternative lives that we might live that we have to jettison and say, I can't live those lives. I can only live this life. And at some point, we do feel like if you had stopped me at the very start of this journey and really made me sit down, I could have told you, yeah, I've got to be a writer, but I was running away. Just like if somebody has a drinking problem, they'll say, I don't have a problem. I can stop anytime I want. I'm only a social drinker. Deep in their heart, they know I got a problem. But it may take 20 years before they hit that all is lost moment when they say, I got a problem. I got to do something about this. Or the positive side of that is, this is me. I found it. This might be, it might take me forever to achieve this dream. I might have to start at a very, very low level and really work, but this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what brings me joy. This is what makes me happy. This is what lets me sleep at night. And also you do have the feeling of, this is really who I am. I was kidding you when I thought I was this, or I was kidding myself. This is really who I am.
Ooh, There is a show to be done on that, Mark. Oh boy.
You're right. Yeah, on the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to kind of just not go too broad here. So how do you take this continuing and finding meaning when there appears to be no meaning in the work, right?
Yeah. Go on. I was about to jump in. I'm clearly excited.
Yeah. So I think the answer actually starts in the previous clip, right? That when there's self-doubt and distraction, that's good. That's good. Okay. I'm pushing myself. I'm stretching. And then you go into the valley of darkness. You're in the work and you've lost touch with, why am I doing this? Is this even worth it? Does anyone want to see this? I'm not sure anymore. I think again it starts with, that's okay. And let's say you're trying to write a page a day and you struggle and you're really struggling, or you get the page done but you think it's crap. I think the most powerful way to handle this and to not freak out is the following. Every day you try and fail brings you a day closer to success. It's like Thomas Edison thinking about the prototypes he did for the light bulb. He's got this famous thought around, well, I may have failed 10,000 times, but actually I just figured out what doesn't work 10,000 times. That got me closer. Another way of thinking about this is the longer you grind, the more of your competitors are all dropping out, right? So an even more immediate thing is I'm up at 6:30 every day and most of my competitors aren't. So you're already getting a sort of a win, even if you're not like writing the best one-pager ever. The fact that you got up and you tried actually does bring you closer, right? Like today you tried this approach, didn't quite work. All right, well, I'll try another one tomorrow. And you'll try until you got one. That iterative trial and error, that learning, that grinding it away, turning up is half the battle. Even if you didn't get the result, the next time you're just a millimeter further in understanding, well, at least I tried this, it didn't work. Tomorrow I'll try a little other approach. I believe if you can say to yourself statistically, even if that one page was poor, it still brings me closer to a better page tomorrow. I think if you can do that, then you're not put off by Monday you write, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and breath. Go again and again and again and again. Because if you just see it as chipping away rather than being stationary, you are actually migrating closer, even if it's a little bit. That's a way when you've given up all the hope you can't see, you keep going because statistically, you know you're a millimeter closer to success. That is progress. I think when I strip it right down, that's the grind, right?
Yeah, you're right. Small growth is still growth. Yes. And like we know from Goggins, he said, if a plant isn't growing, what is it? It's effectively dead. It's static. And you're right, Mike. I think I'm reminded as you're breaking it down, and as we heard from Steven, I'm reminded of the obstacle is the way, of course, you know, from Ron Holiday, this idea of finding the struggle and embracing that as your path. But more a deeper level of that, I think, when I heard you seeing and speaking, is that not only is failure often the way forward, but much like Odysseus going on his Odyssey, there are lessons you can learn if you choose to notice them, to learn from them, embrace them, and look at them with a positive light. It would be very, very easy to see a struggle as a reason to stop doing it. Or it might be this path that I've been on has not, let's say it's a tough job. It's not something I really enjoy. I'm clearly not doing my life's calling because I don't like my job. Well, fast forward a year, 6 months, you're going to look back and say, hey, that helped me realize that I was on the wrong path to my dream job.
Right.
Or it's now made me that little bit tougher so that the next project, the next opportunity that I have to deliver something, it's going to be maybe that little bit easier, or maybe a little bit more pleasant, because there's a necessity in life, isn't there, that we've got to go out and learn lessons. We've got to become more, we've got to become stronger, more patient, maybe have more humility towards others. And I think a lot of that perseverance and perspiration comes from real life events. Not everything you can learn in a book, can you?
That's so right. So what's perfect is in this next clip is a study of the advice that Steven Pressfield has for us about getting through the grind. So, Mark, why don't you unleash this next step in this huge about the war of creativity?
You're totally right to big this one up, Mike, because I'm really excited to dig into productivity games breakdown of this idea of resistance from Steven Pressfield, and also how we go out and combat it.
If we're considering a creative project and we feel distracting urges and intense anxiety, that's a good thing. Pressfield says, if you're feeling massive resistance, the good news is it means there's tremendous love there. If you don't love the project that is terrifying you, you wouldn't feel anything. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. The more resistance you experience, the more important your unmanifested art project or enterprise is to you, and the more gratification you will feel when you finally do it. Resistance is our guide to fulfillment. When we feel lost and overwhelmed, resistance is our guiding compass, our true north. When I'm unsure which book to read and summarize next, I should pick the book that both interests me and gives me anxiety. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur with a long list of business ideas, you should pick the business idea that both excites you and terrifies you. If you're an actor and you don't know what role to take next, take the role that scares you. After we learn to embrace resistance, we must face resistance. Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine tells new Navy SEAL recruits that they're all walking around with two invisible wolves, a fear wolf and a courage wolf. The fear wolf is resistance. It feeds on your fear of it. We have a choice every day. We can either avoid our calling, give in to resistance's demands, and feed the fear wolf, or face resistance and feed our courage wolf. Author Steven Pressfield feeds his courage wolf by sitting down to write at his desk at precisely 10:30 a.m. every day, regardless of how he feels. He starts writing and doesn't stop until he's exhausted, which is typically 3 to 4 hours. He doesn't care how many pages he's produced or if his writing's any good. All that matters, he says, is I put in my time and hit it with all I've got. All that counts is that for this day, for this session, I have overcome resistance. If we commit to sitting down with resistance for a set amount of time every day, something magical happens. It's as though our efforts are being rewarded by a divine power. It's as though we've been given an angel for a day. Pressfield says, when we sit down each day and do our work, power concentrates around us. We become like a magnetized rod that attracts iron filings. Ideas come, insights accrete. Soon resistance goes away and the experience is enjoyable, but only for the remainder of that day. Resistance will be waiting for us on the battlefield tomorrow.
Oh, Mark, this reminds me of running. I know we often draw analogies with running. Like feeding the courage wolf. Like, dude, every time I'm running a long distance, so somewhere between a quarter and a half marathon distance, at some point I'm like, oh, geez, it's really starting to take a toll.
Yeah.
You know? And the crazy thing is I've probably run, I don't know, at least double figures, half marathons or longer, right, in my life. Yeah. And I always chuckle to myself that somewhere on that run, I'm like, oh, gee, there's a lot of resistance. My body just wants to stop. But, you know, the funny thing is when I ran my first marathon, I had really committed to running 42, and I had traveled to Bali a week before. I wasn't in perfect health. I was a little wiped from the travel, and I still ran it and I got it done. But somehow that overcoming of that resistance that first time cemented something I'm never going to lose, which is when I feel my body in a long, long run starting to go, geez, Mike, I'm pretty knackered now. We could totally stop right here. I can somehow go back to the muscle, the memory muscle of, I know that that's okay. And, it reminds me when I finished of what Goggins says, we have no sense of our potential. There's always so much more left in the tank than we realize. So getting up and doing the work every day, building that atomic level habit, whether you're James Clear or Steven Pressfield, the pattern is clear, Mark. Set the commitment to the daily habit and do not surrender to it. Go at it. And it actually, once you start identifying what it takes to overcome it, you become not totally comfortable, but you're prepared for it. And this is the great benefit that we all have if we just stick to our guns and keep going, even despite it's not the courage wolf, the fear wolf, right? When the fear wolf is howling at you to stop, just don't give in, right?
I've been taking so many notes while you've been talking there, Mike, because there's so much we could dive into within this particular topic. And I think already when I'm thinking about feeding my courage wolf, we've obviously spoken a lot about the idea of mantras, the idea of time blocking, but those are really the secret sauce for me when I'm getting up in the morning. Maybe I don't feel that motivation to go out and dig deep today. Maybe if it is a marathon, or maybe it's just a lot of work to do, I might lack that little bit of enthusiasm, motivation, energy. But when I make a promise to myself by writing down, maybe it's a mantra, or putting something physically in my calendar, much like laying out your running shoes the night before you go to bed,
yes, sir.
You're sort of making that promise to yourself tomorrow.
Yep.
And you're saying, go out and do it regardless of how you feel, because exactly as you called out, the next time you run it, you'll notice maybe it's still going to be just as difficult as it was the first time. You probably feel the same resistance and struggle, regardless of how many times you've done it. But instead, what you'll know is you have that gas in the tank to dig that little bit deeper and do it anyway.
Yes.
Won't you?
And that's why if you do it like a new creative task once a day, Monday to Friday, and it might suck for a week, a month, or maybe months, at some point, there is this incredible reward, right? At some point, you'll go, you know what? I've been writing every weekday for the last 5 weeks, and I'm kind of getting in the zone now. I say what happens is you notice two things. When you don't do your daily habit, it feels like something is missing. So the thing you dreaded at the start somehow becomes like, oh my gosh, I haven't done it today. I was too busy, or I was traveling or something. And then the other thing that happens is it becomes a bit contagious. So if you are declaring the war of art with a creative exercise, maybe you do something with something at work, or maybe build resilience in another part of your life. So I would say I take that inner strength I built running, and that permeates in other daily habits that I have. And so I think then this is the expansion of success, right? Where you figure out doing the right things even when it doesn't feel right, knowing that it's the right, you did it anyway. This builds up not only a great capacity to write or to run, but you can like cascade that same mindset. You can almost embrace the playbook and apply it in a different game, and it still works, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know what? You're totally right. There have been many opportunities for me when I am reminded of something physical that I've done. Let's in fact, I'll paint you a picture, Mike. There'll be a difficult project perhaps that I've got. Maybe it's an uncomfortable meeting. Maybe I've got to go and pitch or present something quite complicated, and I'm kind of struggling. You can feel the butterflies. Maybe you're feeling a little bit hot under the collar. You know, the physical manifestations of resistance are starting to bubble up, and you can notice it. For me, when I am in those situations, I am thinking of when I get in the ocean and the water's cold. I know I'll survive. I know I'll get out the other way. And I know if it's a marathon or if it's a race, even if it's 5 kilometers, that moment when you start to feel a little bit tired, your legs are a bit blocky and you don't want to go any further. If you push that a little bit more, you know you can finish it, because each of those moments I've made it through. So I know that I can get through this experience as long as I stick to it, as long as I have that drive to go out and finish what I've started. And also, exactly as Pressfield's really calling us out here in today's episode, along that way, when you notice that resistance and you notice those moments when you kind of do want to run away or drop tools and say, it's too hard, sorry, Mike, I can't do this after all. Or worse than that, you just leave it. And then the deadline rolls around and you haven't done your first chapter. You haven't written your days, your pages each week, each morning, and you leave it alone. That's when you start to realize, I'm missing something. And that affects your self-confidence. That affects your drive. And that, for me, when I look back at things that I wish I'd done maybe a little bit differently, it's the things that I put off. It's the things that I didn't really apply myself towards.
Right.
But as Pressfield's telling us, as long as you learn from it, hey, that's okay. It's positive.
So facing the resistance and feeding the carriage work, this is like where the rubber meets the road, right? Because we've sort of made that breakthrough of, okay, there's a challenge, no problem. It's part of the journey. Got it. But then that's when you need to set those daily habits and stick to them. Keep your promises to yourself. And I would say that this all coexists in this other big idea from Steven Pressfield, which is the work that we need to do inside of ourselves to truly produce great things. And Mark, I think you've got a very nice clip here that speaks to that.
Yeah, that's right, Mike. So Steven Pressfield is not only painting a picture for us today around resistance, the drive that you need to go out and get things done, but also I think with all types of resistance, you kind of want to know where you're going. You enjoy the journey, but you have a dream in place. So this final clip, Mike, that we're going to hear from Steven Pressfield today on the War of Art is all about your inner work.
If somebody was going to ask me, like, for one thing, if you're a young guy or gal and you're sort of struggling or trying to find your calling, I would say, and this might sound crazy, pay attention to your dreams. Keep learn to remember your dreams. There's a wonderful book. I'm going to recommend a book here. It's called Inner Work by Robert Johnson, and who's a great Jungian therapist. And it's about interpreting dreams. And I really do believe that in our soul, and that's what's talking to us when a dream comes, it is a source of wisdom that's way beyond anything we have up here, And when we're lost, I know I can look back at various points in my life where a dream has come at exactly the right time and kind of told me something that kept me going, or pointed me in one direction or pointed me away from another thing. And I've heard a lot of other people that I've talked to and that I know say the same thing. I would not dismiss dreams. It's a real skill. I keep, at my bedside, I keep a little, tape recorder, but everybody else has got an iPhone or something like that because you forget your dreams. But I would say, pay attention to your dreams because, and in my darkest hours, that was when dreams were really vivid and they were really coming to me. And absolutely, I'm convinced it was my unconscious or my soul trying to rescue me, trying to give me advice. And I do think it's pretty much infallible what it will tell you. So that would be my one last thought. Pay attention to your dreams.
Now, I actually have a question about that because I can never remember my dreams. Is there something technique?
This is absolutely true, John. I mean, I'm the same way. For whatever it is, dreams evaporate. That's why I think you absolutely have to train yourself to get out your phone or whatever it is in that moment. We always say to ourselves, "Oh, there's no way I'll forget this. This is so vivid." And then like 2 minutes later, it's completely gone. You don't even know what it was. So you do have to sort of train yourself in those moments. Roll over, grab your iPhone, dictate just enough that you'll remember it in the morning. But that's a skill that you sort of have to teach yourself to. And if you think about, in the primitive man, or the whatever it is, the shaman.
Yeah.
That was his skill to access the unconscious and to pay attention to dreams. So it's a really important thing, I think.
So this inner work, like listening to your subconscious in your dreams, I've got a little twist on this, Mark. I'm just like, try and hold on to yourself when you are daydreaming about things. Wouldn't it be great? Right? Though, those ideas that you have. I could imagine a life like you come across someone who are living a life or doing some work, and you go, gosh, how would I love to do that? Right?
Yeah.
Like it really grabs you. So I'm not talking about you're in bed and you're having a dream. Whilst that is totally valid, I'm like being even more practical. When you find yourself just daydreaming about work or people that are living life and doing things that you think I could be doing or I would like to do, grab those moments, because I think that's somehow life revealing to you this is your path. I mean, sure, there's a whole episode we need to do on following your path and purpose, but I think tuning into that is vital. Don't entertain your dreams and not take record of them.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think you're totally right, Mike. There's the build that we could do into that subconscious mind, whereby you're in a hectic or stress situation, and your body and your mind is creating. Let's call them lessons while you're unconscious, and I got into a habit of writing down my dreams sometimes. And, Steven's right. If you write it down, if you don't write it down, you're going to forget it.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the key thing, exactly as you were just building towards there, is this power of reflecting and knowing your dreams consciously as well. So whether that's by comparison to others, hey, I really like that life that somebody has. Maybe I want to be just like J.K. Rowling. And that dream of mine is to create an empire of books or whatever it might be. But it's really, I think, understanding and noticing those moments within your day whereby you get excitement and you get a glee and an enthusiasm and an energy around something that you could call your dream. Maybe it's a passion for talking to others. Maybe it's taking care of others. Maybe it's a passion for creating new products or projects. Reflecting via journaling, reflecting via talking to someone, or maybe, as Steven's saying, put it in a tape recorder.
Right.
As long as I think you acknowledge it, then that dream becomes a little bit more of a reality rather than something that's just in the back of your head that maybe you forget sometimes.
Yes.
And you commit it down to paper. Maybe you put it on your wall or your background of your laptop, or it's something that stays in your journal whereby only you can check it out. Yeah. I think this idea of the dream is something that, as long as you make reference to and notice,
yes,
you can actually strive towards getting there, can't you?
You really can. So a great exercise I'd recommend to all of our listeners, viewers, and members is take 10 minutes to dream about the legacy that you want to live. And what people remember about you, and that is your North Star, right? Imagine what is being said at your funeral, right?
Yeah.
And reverse engineer from that, because that for me is the biggest wake up call, right? As a middle-aged guy, I'm like, oh, geez, what is my legacy going to be, right? Oh, dear. And that'll get you going. And that'll give you fuel like crazy, right? Like you will be off to the moon if you connect with that. Yeah. That is your dream, right? So go out and live it. Well, Matt, we got some serious advice from Mr. Pressfield. We started with the agenda of being creative. We didn't quite realize that this meant going to war, Mark. Lots of themes, lots of things we can work on. What are you going to work on as a result of this show?
It's really acknowledging and referencing and appreciating the valley of darkness. The hero's journey for all of us takes place. So when I'm in that moment where things are getting a little bit tough, maybe I'm thinking about running away. Instead, I'm going to batten down the hatches and make sure I fight my way through it, because there are lessons to be learned. That's, for me, Mike, such a big aha moment. It's fantastic. What about you today on Steven Pressfield's book?
So I liked it, that hero's journey piece as well. But I'm going to go for feeding the courage wolf.
Ooh,
How good is
very
that?
good. Very
How good.
practical.
Yeah, feed that wolf. All right, Mark,
Yeah.
listen, a big thank you to you. And a thank you to you, our listeners, viewers, and members too, here on show 264, where we looked at the work of Steven Pressfield, The War of Art. And there were 4 big ideas that started with the idea that we all suffer the same internal challenges, fear and self-doubt. But we need to recognize that if we are feeling lost, and we're out there in the wilderness or the valley of darkness, that this is just part of the required steps of the hero's journey. So we can go out and we can embrace and face resistance. We can feed that courage wolf. We can live the life that we dream of. We can do the inner work on ourselves to be the best version of ourselves. And you can do that right here. You can learn out loud together with all of us here at the Moonshots Podcast. That's a wrap.